Sunday School leaders. We are continuing in our unit entitled More Than Enough, How Jesus Meets Our Deepest Needs. This week we are in John chapter 11, looking at our need for hope. And the point of this lesson is Jesus is the resurrection who gives us life now and forever. You know, I think every generation has suffered from a feeling of hopelessness. And if I think about just over the last 100 years or so, my grandparents on my dad's side, when they were just youngsters, World War I was going on. Terrible war. You know, the introduction of mustard gas. It was supposed to be the Great War, the war that was to end all wars. And of course we know that that didn't happen. Now my grandparents on my mother's side, they were raising my mother during the early 1940s when World War II was going on, when all the atrocities of the Nazi death camps and all that was going on. And then you get to me, when my parents were raising me, in just the first 10 years of my life, the assassination of the Kennedys, Martin Luther King Jr., that hippie movement, all that stuff was going on. Vietnam, all that was starting up. And I can imagine my parents thinking, what kind of world is this that we're bringing our child into? And then as I get older and get married, and Ruth and I have Sarah, we bring her into the world, and that's about the time that the Berlin Wall's coming down, and it's kind of an exciting time, but it's also a precarious time. We're not sure exactly what's going on. You've got all the Serbian strife going on, Muammar Gaddafi, all these, the Gulf War, all these things are going on, and it was really an interesting time then too, because it was like, what kind of world is this? Now Sarah is grown, she has a child now, and baby Henry is now in the world where terrorist bombings and campus shootings are commonplace, and they make the news, but they're not that big a deal because we've become so accustomed to them, and that is really sad. He's going to grow up in a world where ISIS is a threat, and it just seems hopeless, and our world seems to be getting worse and worse, whether that's on a global level or on a personal level. I know as I get older, after I got to be age 50, it seems like every couple of years or so I need a stronger and stronger eyeglass prescription. Ruth thinks I need a hearing aid to be able to hear her. That's a different story. It seems easier and easier to gain weight. The aches and pains don't go away as quickly as they used to. So even on a personal level, I seem to be deteriorating as well. So with all the things going on personally, as we get older, as well as globally, as we just think the world is going downhill faster and faster, it's easy to see why some just give up, because we need hope. We need something to hope in, something to believe in. And of course there is hope. We know that as believers. That hope comes from Jesus Christ. Our text today is out of John chapter 11. And before you get down to starting to read your text, it might be good to give a little backstory. This is the raising of Lazarus. And our text doesn't even get that far to where Jesus commands Lazarus to come forth. It's good, I think, to give a little, if you go back to verse 1 and do a little reading there to see what was going on before the text in the Sunday school lesson. So you see at the beginning of chapter 11, back in verse 1, that word is sent to Jesus in Bethany that his friend Lazarus is sick. And Jesus, of course, being in Bethany, it's only about 2 miles away. It's not that far. And we see down in verse 6 that Jesus stayed an additional 2 more days after hearing this. Interesting. Now we get down to our text, our proper text down in verse 17, where our Sunday school lesson starts. We see that Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days. It's an interesting thought. Common Jewish belief in that time was that the soul kind of lingered around the body for about 4 days, and when the soul saw the face starting to deteriorate, or when that decomposition sets in, that the soul then leaves. I think Jesus is trying to make a point here that this wasn't a little parlor trick, or that Lazarus was really just kind of unconscious for a while, that Lazarus was really dead. I really think that's the point of why he stayed in Bethany those extra days. And so we get down here to Martha. Martha's coming out to talk to Jesus. Now if you remember, Martha is the one who loved action. You had the story of Mary and Martha. Martha's the one going around working and doing everything, and Mary's the one sitting at Jesus' feet. So I liken Martha to the Apostle Peter, that the person of action that's always in there wanting to do something and saying things. And she's the one that comes out and greets Jesus when Jesus is coming to their house. And she says, if you had only been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And you almost sense halfway an accusation and halfway a statement of faith, that had you have been here, you could have prevented this disease. But it also shows a little bit of lack of, the full lack of knowledge on Martha's part, that she didn't completely understand that time was not an obstacle for Jesus. Now we get down to verse 23, and Jesus says, well, your brother is going to rise again. And Martha replies in verse 24, I know he will at the end of time. Now Jesus does not refute Martha's statement, but what he does do is he comes across with another one of these I am statements, and that's what we've been studying these past few weeks. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And when he does that, when he claims that, what he's doing is he's claiming to be the source of both of those. He's the source of resurrection. He's the source of life. There's no resurrection apart from Christ. And there's no eternal life apart from him either. He's also making the statement about his divine nature. He does more than just give life. He is life. And therefore death has no ultimate power over him. And he, of course, proved that on that Easter Sunday. Now, Martha is concerned that Jesus is a little too late to help. Like I say, if you'd only been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And so Jesus shows here, kind of like I said earlier, that neither death nor time is an obstacle to him. He's above both of those things. So just from this little exchange going on here between Martha and Jesus, we can see the difference in what Martha thinks. Now, Martha is a believer. She's a follower, but she doesn't completely understand everything. And so just we can see the limited knowledge she has and how Jesus corrects that. Martha believed that the resurrection is an event, and that's true to an extent, but Jesus showed her and shows us that the resurrection is more than an event. The resurrection is a person. Martha had an idea about eternal life. It's kind of an abstract idea to her, and Jesus showed her and proved that the knowledge of eternal life is a personal relationship. It's not abstract, it's a relationship, and that relationship's a personal one. Martha also thought that victory over death was a future expectation. And while that's true, it's partially true, because Jesus shows her, corrects her, and shows her that victory is a present reality. Now, a question you might want to ask your class is this. It's the same question that Jesus asked Martha. Do you believe in Jesus? That word believe is that put your faith in, trust completely. Do you believe in Jesus? Not believe about, not just believe some historical facts, but have you put your faith in Jesus? See, this is an evangelistic lesson. And being Easter, you may have some more people in class than normal, maybe some of those nominal members who don't come that often. And you never know. You never know the spiritual condition of a person. So it's always good to point blank ask those questions, regardless of which side of the political aisle you sit on, whether that be Democrat, Republican, whatever. If your hope is in a candidate, especially this season, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Now, what we need to remember is that our hope comes from a person who not only gives life, but is life, who will not only resurrect us at the end, but is the resurrection. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Let me just finally remind you about early, up, in, and far. Come to the early service if you can. Sit up as close to the front as you can. Sit on the inside of the aisle to leave those outside seats. And park as far away from the church building as you can. That'll help our guests. That'll help our senior adults, because we're going to be crowded as we normally are both services on Easter Sunday. All right. Hope you have a great Sunday, and don't forget to pray for your class. See you Sunday.